into the closing keynote of this year's Writivism Festival. The theme of this year's festival is legacy, and I'm sure most of you were there for Professor Taban Leong's opening keynote on Friday evening, where he talked about jawbones and umbilical cords. So I think this is a fitting way to close this festival. And so I would really welcome you all, and thanks for coming. And I do want to welcome Hilda. Let me just get the Bible. Twongyeirwe. Have I mangled that? Sorry, sorry. Hilda hails from Kacherere, near Lake Bunyonyi. She is the Executive Director of FEMRITE, Uganda Women Writers Association. She's a recipient of a national medal for her contribution to Uganda's literary heritage and women emancipation. A recognition award from Uganda. A recognition award from Uganda Registration Services Bureau, URSB, and the Art and Culture Women for Women's Award 2018. She is a member of the Grasa Machel Trust Women in Media Network Action for Development, FODE, and FEMRITE. She has served on different boards in the literary and book sector. The Reading Association of Uganda, the National Book Trust of Uganda, and the African Asian Writers Union. She has published creative and non-fiction works in different anthologies. She has also initiated literary projects and edited or co-edited a number of the resulting publications. She has researched and compiled memoirs under FEMRITE and Action for Development. She has also authored and co-authored literary articles published in different spaces. She holds a BA Arts degree and an MA in Public Administration and Management from Makerere University. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Hilda.
Thank you very much for the generous introduction. And before I start on my keynote, kindly allow me, since we are speaking about legacies, and I believe it is okay, I would like to take this opportunity to stand in solidarity with a fellow Ugandan artist whom you've all heard about, Robert Chaburani, who is said to have undergone torture, but we are all praying that he is well and that he will bounce back on the culture scene soon. And whereas, of course, we might not subscribe to his ideologies and his actions, because we all have different ideologies and choose different actions, but we do subscribe to the law of the land, to our constitution, to the human rights instruments that we are all signatories to. And so for that reason, I would like to stand in solidarity with him, because he has bequeathed Uganda a legacy of beautiful songs, beautiful literature. And so for that, I stand in solidarity with him. I would like to appreciate the organizers of Writivism 2018 for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon. And I will speak about women because, as you have heard, I have really been a lot in literary spaces, but to do with women. I contributed to other spaces as well, but my keynote is to do with women. And I titled it Literature and Activism, African Women Writers at Crossroads. I speak to different concepts and different women across the continent. I thought I should not tie it to Uganda or tie it to one thing. So I hope you will move with me and follow through as I speak about women. In 2017, I was invited for a meeting, a conference, I think, of writers, and we were talking about we were speaking to the thematic area of the role of African authors in enhancing African identity in the perspective of the history of African literature, colonial, post-colonial, and contemporary literature. This made me think about the position of women in African literature in relation to activism. I began to wonder about how much of African women's literature has impacted on activism in Africa, be it women activism, gender activism, political and social activism. And with the reading culture in Africa, I began to wonder how much of women's literature is in the spaces where reading is key. Spaces like schools, spaces like universities, and how visible the women's literature is in such spaces in comparison to the other literature which society has decided is the mainstream literature. And whereas women in literature would as well refer to women characters featured in literary works, in this presentation I choose to focus on women producing literature, the writers. And whereas the presentation speaks about Africa, I mainly pick from Africa, the English-speaking writers. And whereas I could extend this to a period probably before colonialism into oral traditions, again, this presentation focuses on written literature. I do not venture into oral literature. And I would like to start by reflecting on women in literature in the 1950s and 1960s, and also connect it to what it was before, where women were the main storytellers and custodians of different forms of oral literature in traditional African communities. But this position did not automatically allow them to transit into written literature in the early stages of African literature. I am looking at the period of the 1950s to date, where they did not transit into written literature, rather they were overtaken by events which saw them relegated to the periphery in the production of written literature. Names in African names such as Okot, Bitek, Wole Soyinka, Chinua Achebe, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Taban, who we had yesterday and the other day, and other male writers remained alone for almost a decade on Africa's literary landscape, with the exception in 1966 of Flora Nwapa. That is around that time. Flora Nwapa came on the scene in 1966, but otherwise, women's names began to be seen later on in the 1970s and 1980s. And since then, more waves of women writers have continued to flow on the continent's literary scene, but not without challenges. This presentation does not dismiss, I would like you to note that I do not dismiss oral literature, but it's just a focus that I've chosen to look at written literature. It also examines how women perceive their position and role in African literature as opposed to the role ascribed by society through both the voice and unvoiced expectations towards enhancing African identity against the backdrop of history, colonialism, post-colonialism, and contemporary concerns. And in terms of methodology, I used secondary data. I read from the internet. I read some books, and I read articles from different spaces. I did not do interview. I just compiled from literary data. And then I go to literature and activism. I would like to venture a little bit and say that different scholars attach different meanings to activism. I tried to read about activism, and it's very too extensive, different scholars also define it differently, and sometimes you find that the definitions actually conflict. And so I chose to look at it the way I wanted. And so my understanding of it is simply doing actions and activities aimed at causing change or a shift in status quo. But in case anyone asked, so I got like 3 scholars and I wrote what they say here, but I will not get into that now. Addressing myself to literature and activism, if we consider that every form of literature is a form of a writer's truth, which means then that every writing is a form of activism, whether the writer is aware or unaware of their role as an activist. What matters is that in writing, the writer is exposing their idea or ideology for readers to engage with. I would like to invite us all to look back. I know there are many writers here. I would like to invite us to look at what we have written. Sometimes you just write, but when you look back, you find a different meaning to your work. And I will share a bit of my own experience of norm and unknown activism. In 2007, I wrote a small children's reader for primary 1, people just getting into school. And the title is My School. When I wrote that book, I put the actual name of my village. I used my village name just for the excitement of having Katerere. I always talk about it in my CV because I think it's a beautiful view. You need to, if you haven't been there, you need to visit and see it. But it was just for the sheer excitement. But Whereas I never set out to write that as an activist, I wrote my village into the consciousness of every child who would read that little book. And later, when I was thinking about it, I realized it was because I had read other names into textbooks, but I had never read about my own village. And so I realized that actually this was activism, a very small act of activism. When I wrote my very first short story, Becoming a Woman, which got published in a woman's anthology in 2018, in a woman's voice anthology in 2018, I had for the longest time been disturbed by society views about women and menstrual periods. And so I wrote knowing that I wanted to tell myself and other girls that it was okay to stain my dress and not feel the pressure, because I am not in control of my menstrual flow. I can only try not to stain, but if my biological setup decides to do its own gymnastics and stuff escapes, it should be okay, and society should either shut up or support me, which I had not seen growing up. I still remember an experience of a friend of mine who was taunted close to leaving school. So when I thought I could write, that was the very first story that I thought of writing. And so for that, unlike my village name, for that I knew it was an act of activism. And in that same anthology, there are different women's stories, but I would like to quote Dr. Susan Chiguli's story. It's titled Mad Appeal. Mad Appeal, in that story, in Dr. Susan Chiguli's story, she fell in a pit and people called her septic at university. And she decided to call up one of the boys who used to call her that name and she said, come, let's sort this, let's come, we have a fight, and then we'll decide that this ends. And the boy said, no, I don't fight women. And the girl said, it's okay if you don't fight women. If you don't fight with women, I will beat you up. I will not fight with you, but I will beat you up. And she did that, and then everybody said, oh my God, she's mad. So that is how Mad Appeal begins, and later when she's married and her husband dies, the people come, the clansmen, her in-laws come to collect property, and she undresses the man's property. She undresses and says, okay, as you do the list of what to carry, what belongs to my husband, start with my private parts, because that was one of his most treasured, and they all scattered, left her. And so, yeah, so there is no way we can detach our writing from activism at whatever level. As I said, it may be known, it may be unknown, but it is. Writing is an act of activism. And FEMRITE has done a lot more anthologies. There's a non-fiction project where we have memoirs, and again, those clearly go out. We move out to get those as acts of activism. And there's one particular story I would like to refer to. I think it's titled Mai Basubeni by Betty Kituyi, which it's about female genital mutilation. And one of the women, she's called Brenda, she read it and she wrote to FEMRITE and said, because of that story, I stood up and I did not accept I did not bow to the pressure of my community to undergo female genital mutilation. So, yes, writing is activism. But, so women have done this, and this is not just in Uganda, it's in other countries as well. But although they've done this, it has not been without challenges. There's been quite a lot of challenges with regard to women and writing. And I start from, again I go back, I talked about how Flora Nwapa's story was one of the first ones to come on the literary scene. And when it came, the first, we had men writing, and when it came, everybody would have expected that this is going to be a celebration, but it was not. Instead, people called it weak. People tried to silence her, the readers, the critics, but you can see that up to now, it is one of the classic books that Africa has. And yet, at that point, there was no encouragement at all. This presentation also assesses the mandate and the ability and the positioning of women in African literature in enhancing African identity. It is important to note that across the continent, as I already said, women came late into education. And I give an example of Uganda. When we had Gayaza starting, I was reading about Gayaza High School, and Gayaza as a school for girls. When it started, it did not start so that the women are given the kind of education that the men were getting. It started because the educated women from other spaces needed good wives and good homemakers. So then Gayaza had to start to provide that. And so the kind of education that they had probably contributed to their not getting into writing immediately at that time. The aim was not to enable them contribute to the world's canon of knowledge in their own right, but through supporting their husbands and families. It is therefore no wonder that they were not equipped with appropriate knowledge and subjects as was done for the African male students of that time. And I will quote a literary critic, Sadia, who says who observes that as the change happened from oral to written literature, and I quote, new requirements for rhetorical mastery appeared. The elements that legitimated centrality altered from those based upon sex and age to those anchored in the knowledge of the colonizer's language, the English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. Apart from these languages, the ideas of Victorian colonial education became an additional hindrance for African women writers. She further, another scholar, Naneka, observes that politics of publishing also complicated matters for the African woman writer, as publishers did not readily take on manuscripts from women, a phenomenon that we still see today and which is one of the reasons that led women to establish their own literary spaces, especially from the 1990s. Women's literary works are still referred to by publishers as those women's writings on women's issues. Women still suffer the same challenges now, including negative criticism, or altogether being left out of the critics and book reviewers' literary discourse. Sometimes women's work get attention and reviews, not because book reviewers are interested in their work, but because they have very active publicists who know how to package writers, seek book reviews and references, and get readings and book signing events. It therefore becomes a question, more of a question of marketing than a question of inclusion in literary criticism. African women's literature, for instance, has been identified and clustered separate from men's literature, which has led women writers to ask why their literature cannot exist just as literature alongside men's literature. Yet men's literature is simply literature without a gender tag. Is this separation in any way an advantage? Let's ask ourselves. Maybe yes, because then perhaps women's literature is given more attention than it would receive under the general pool world literature. But maybe it is at a disadvantage because then women's literature is being added and is so being rendered vulnerable. And what then is the position of the vulnerable in the world of the big jaws ideology, as Professor Taban eloquently described in his fable at the opening keynote. However, although this othering is resisted for its separationist nature, it is an important aspect in strategically positioning African women's struggles and achievements, both in terms of practical milestones and ideology. This should, however, not deny the women writers the opportunity to decide how they want to make their own interpretation and give their own side of the story on all issues of society. Because after all, it is not just a woman's world or a man's world, it is a shared world. In the 1990s, when Mary Kahora started writing, I would like to share a few anecdotes. Her novel Invisible Widow is quite political. It talks about the political situation of the country. And when it came out, some critics said that her husband was writing for her, but she was only putting her name. And that was the same comment when she started writing in the press. She had a forum and she would address political issues. Again, they said that because her husband was a member he was in government, a big wing in government, so I think they did not see how it would be very writing. And then if I look, so society kind of decides, okay, you will write about this and not that. And when, again, looking at women at Crossroads, when Sisi Dangalemba was taking her manuscript for publication, the publishers decided she was writing harshly about some of the women characters in the book, and they decided, no, we will not publish this. So she was not given a publishing platform for quite some time until later. she got published. And it was the same with Buchi Emecheta, who was thought to have very strong female characters. And then that became a problem. So, you know, that it gets problematic if you would like to prescribe what the women should write about. When Goretti Chomendo's novel, The Secrets No More came out, we had a reading, and at National Theatre, and one of the critics said, this is too, you cannot publish this is too graphic. And yes, the novel has graphic sexual scenes, but, and then somebody said that it could not get on the syllabus because of the graphic sex scenes. And then I remembered Takuwa Christ of Bomba. I don't know if any of you guys found it on our syllabus, but we had that on our syllabus in Uganda. And actually, I think Brito wrote about it as Africa's novel that has the longest sexual scene, the African novel with the longest sex scene. But so when Secrets No More can't come on the syllabus, but there's Poor Christ of Bomba by a male. So what is the problem? Is it the novel, or is it the fact that this novel is written by this female and that was that by that man? So that puts women writers at crossroads. And then if we look at our curriculums, I was reading some a critic, a scholar, Sheila Carrington, and she was teaching at university, and she refers to a time. Her paper is Redefining Activism, Lessons from Women's Literature. And she says, when I introduced women writers, she lists them, a colleague accused me of attempting to sabotage the course. When the English department, at my request, proposed adding a women's literature course, a department head objected on the grounds that often such courses have a political agenda. And more recently, when the faculty offered an interdisciplinary symposium required of all students, I had to fight to get a handful of women like Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Virginia Woolf, and on the syllabus. And one colleague declared, we can't address all the special interests. I reminded him that 62% of our students are female and that women are the majority in the department. And so, you see, when the men are being told, nobody, it's okay, it's the canon that we have, it's the set form of literature that is accepted. When the women are introduced, then we're disrupting the status quo. That becomes problematic as women seek to make their mark. So I reflected on Ugandan literature and Ugandan literature in the classroom, and we have had literature in Uganda since literature taught state texts since the 60s. And since then, we've had one female book, one little book, which I really feel is a token from a Ugandan woman. The Curse of the Secret Cow. I don't know who has read that. And it's not even her best. It's by Mary Karoro Okrut. So reflecting on that, I thought, okay, all this time, there is no Ugandan woman that should get on the syllabus. So what happened when we have a syllabus like that? What does it mean for us who go through it? What does it mean for the children? What does it mean for the teacher? What are we doing for the people going through such a system? And so it has been, we've had Ugandan men, we've had a few non-Ugandan women, but for once, in 2015, that's when one Ugandan woman was up. And I think if we are talking about women empowerment, I think it should be extended to all spaces so that when we are looking at literature, when we are looking at instruction materials, women empowerment should also be extended there. I read about some of Chimamanda's interviews, and she says, I think it was an interview with Aaron Budden, does a lot of literary interviews, and Aaron politely asks her to explain why her writing on the theme of love was not a descent, whether she was not descending from where she had placed herself with the other thematic areas. And that was in reference to Americana as a love story. Chimamanda is unapologetic about that, and she says, it is very interesting, isn't it, that when a woman writes a love story, it's a love story. But when a man writes a love story, but yeah, I love the love story. I wanted to do that very much. So the women are responding by standing their ground and not being apologetic about their writing. The women are responding by nurturing each other. And I read about different women who have nurtured others to write, who I write about here. And I would like to report something about Pumla Dineo. She has, I think last year, Professor Pumla Dineo is in Leeds University. Yeah, she wrote an article. She put out a book. She launched her book last year, and one of her chapters is on FEMRITE, which I found really, really an honor, because she does it in a very she reflects really about FEMRITE books, speaks about a lot of the FEMRITE books and the literary value they bring on the table, the value, the feminism value that they come with on the table. And I would really like to recognize that. She credits what FEMRITE has accomplished in terms of empowering authors psychologically, and sometimes not just women authors, but male authors as well. And other academics have also written about FEMRITE, and so I would like to recognize that and take it as an honor, because a lot of reading happens with referencing. When you do not get referenced, you may never get read, or many people may never hear about you. I would like to credit Zimbabwe Women Writers Association, which was also formed in the 1990s, and it became like a torchbearer to women writing in Africa. They continue to struggle, but they're still in existence. And FEMRITE, when FEMRITE was getting established, had a lot of lessons from Zimbabwe women writers. And that is how what women are doing to escape the hurdles, to be able to write and to be able to make a contribution and to be able to do their activism and writivism. And if anyone is from Zambia, I hope you know Zambia Women Writers Association. There's Ethiopia Women Writers Association. There's Mbasem in Ghana. There's AMCA in Nairobi. AMCA has both men and women, but I think it is majorly driven by the women. And so I would like to recognize immensely their contribution. And also, in a very special way, I would like to, since I have the platform, I would like to recognize other women who have started literary initiatives which may not only address women's concerns, which may publish men as well, like Cassava Republic by Bibi Bakale. There's Story Moja in Nairobi by Muthoni Garland. There's African Writers Trust in Uganda, Goreti Chomuhendo. There's BNP, Beverly Namboso. There's so many stories, Helen Nyana. There's Mojaji Books in Cape Town, that is basically for women. And these are women doing things for one another. And I recognize that. And so, I guess I should end here. But I would like to end by saying that I would like to emphasize that I would really be, it is important that African literature reflects and represents the diverse nature of the continent, enabling all Africans, men and women, to see their images reflected as desired through literature without any hurdles. Let's support one another. Let's embrace each other in equal measure, because I've seen sometimes where writers get on stage together, and then this, the critic comes up and says, I quote one critic who said, we had beautiful poetry from, and mentioned a male's name, it was in the papers, I think it was in New Vision. We had beautiful poetry from so-and-so, a man, and then we had women's themes from Action for Development. Action for Development had readings, and it was all literary. And that is how the critic presented that. So that is my request, that let's respect each other's voices, let's respect each other with equal measure. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thanks so much, Hilda, for these amazing insights that you shared with us. Activism, as you know, is a lot of work. It is, one has to engage fully, I think, in it. It does actually occupy a lot of time. On the other hand, you know, writing also is something that requires huge efforts. There's a lot that's been made about the tension, about this tension, about concentration or thinking about one's aesthetics, right? And on the other hand, activism, I think, requires a kind of investment in a kind of, mostly a political agenda. You see, is this a valid tension? Is this, I know you said writing in itself, even when the writer doesn't recognize this, is activism. You see a tension between questions of aesthetics and questions of especially political activism.
I think, as from where I started from, to say that writing is an act of activism, I would like to take it as an act of activism, and yes, I think it is. And probably it is that question of aesthetics that people might feel that when you're trying to be very involved as an outright activism, then you might lose out on the aesthetics of good literature. But I really don't see a conflict. I don't see any tension between the two, because good writing is good writing. And so, yeah, so really I do not see any tension. And also, when the writer is writing, many people should take it up. Once it leaves the writer, then it belongs to the community. And so anyone can take it and use it, and can also probably do something to it, to this writing, that makes it more relevant or makes it better aesthetically, or, yeah.
Thanks. Just reflecting on the festival's theme around legacies. I mean, Uganda and Kampala, of course we are sitting below the huge legacy of Makerere as one of the kind of founding spaces of African literature. And I'm always curious about writing within this kind of, beneath or the shadow of something, I think, so big. Now, for you as a writer and for FEMRITE, is this an enabling thing, or is it, can it be crippling? I'm just very, very curious about what the legacy of a space like Makerere means to you and means to FEMRITE.
Yesterday as well, but Friday as well, we had Professor Staban Lorion.
Yes. And especially in the context of what they are saying, yes. Yes,
in the context of his delivery, in even the fact that he is one of the big legacies from Makerere University. And so, yes, I think it's it makes a very big contribution. When FEMRITE, when we are going to do anything, we know that we are in the NGO sector. We know that we have Makerere University. We move to Makerere University, and I will ask, how can you lend my my NGO ideology and academic outlook that will then make it better? And so if I'm going to run a conference, the first space I will think about is Makerere University. I will think about it in terms of even the people who have left the university, not just those who are still there, but even those who have left the university. I think about it in terms of those who have been in interaction with Makerere University. And so it becomes, it really becomes an opportunity. Becomes an opportunity. Earlier this year, the Chinua Achebe Foundation sent FEMRITE a letter and requested us to do Achebe Things Fall Apart at 60. And the very first thought in my mind was, we have to do this with Makerere University. And so I spoke to Dr. Who is in the audience. I would like to recognize the presence of my lecturer, Dr. Benge. Please don't say how I performed in your poetry classes. Yes, but yeah, I went and spoke to him. How do we do this? So, and the same with Writivism. I hope and believe that there is a strong collaboration to learn from, to feed into what we are doing, because it's important. Yes.
Well...
And probably I could also add the fact that Writivism runs the Opport BTech legacy, where they had a writing competition and a prize under that. That all for me is part of that event.
Thanks. Now, the legacy, I think, of Writivism is all these incredible writers that have come from Writivism, the who's who of Ugandan contemporary writing. And these are such strong voices. And part of me, what is it like working and kind of blending all these voices under one house? You want to talk about that? I'm quite curious about that. Being an editor myself, I know what it actually takes to kind of negotiate the minefields that are possible when you're dealing with a lot of creative voices.
Probably that should be answered by Lauren, how he's doing it. But maybe the only thing I can do is credit Writivism for every new voice that they have discovered, because they have first-time writers, and then they pop up, and they pop up with such a strong story. So it is a new tradition. It's a new wave of writing that Writivism has ushered onto the continent, not just onto the country, but onto the continent. And I would like to recognize that. And that is where I would like to tap from, that the writers who are coming out of Writivism, it's not just about Writivism, but how they feed into the other spaces out there, how they make the legacy just continue into different spaces.
No, thanks. I think I'll open this up for the audience. We have Roland, am I correct in saying that we have about 30 minutes? Okay, great. So we have about 30 minutes for interactions, questions, comments, thoughts. So I think we can take 3 at a time, and then Harriet.
Thank you, Hilda, for that address. I'd like to start by a comment and an appeal. So we've had a lot of discussions about the absence or the limited presence of female literature by women on our syllabus. And I'm wondering if, and a lot of that discussion is usually made in reference to the novel or plays, and I'm wondering if we do not need to look at other forms of writing. We have the short story now, we have flash fiction, we have insta poetry, we have pictories, and so many other forms of writing. Can't we take advantage of those forms of writing to interest students who are studying literature to engage with those kinds of work? Because you and me know that advocating for more books or novels by female writers will take a very long time. Mary Kahora is on the syllabus, and some people will say she probably got onto the syllabus because she's a minister, so she could have used her influence to, but that is a debate for another day. So can we explore the other forms of literature? Because I imagine that it doesn't hurt a teacher or a lecturer of literature to give a coursework to students to read a short story or to read a poem. Then the other is a question, really, which is again to pick your mind on the fact that a lot of times we advocate for representation of women on the syllabus and on many other spaces, in political spaces. In Uganda, we have what we call the affirmative action, where women are given special seats so that they can go to parliament. But we've all seen that a lot of women who have gone to parliament have refused to leave, to leave space for younger women. And I'm beginning to wonder if we are not falling into the trap of just advocating for numbers and not what the actual content or the actual contribution is. In terms of our literature, is it enough to have literature by a woman on the syllabus, or should we also worry about what we are producing out there? Because I believe that good work will speak for itself. Yeah.
Thanks, Harriet. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Hello, I have two questions. What advice would you give to an upcoming female writers? The second question is, if you're given a chance, what's that one thing you would do right or different that other upcoming young female writers could learn from? Thank you.
Okay, let's take those.
Thank you, Harriet. Thank you for being present today at Writivism. The challenge, I think I would like to agree with you that we can take advantage of the flash fiction, the short stories, the poetry, and get them into schools. And many writers and publishers have actually been trying to do that. FEMRITE, almost every year we have a school program, a school project, where we engage with students, where we take books to schools, the books that are not on the syllabus. And I know that other initiatives are doing that as well. The challenge, however, is about the fact, the nature of our syllabus, that if a book is not a reference material, if a book is not a textbook, if it is not a text that is prescribed for reading, there will not be time for it. So what we need to do is encourage that other reading, but again, which is not mandatory. And so so whereas we do that, I think we should not give up about being in the spaces where we know that reading is going to take place. Yeah, but yes, let's get those other forms of writings into schools. Yeah. And then with regard to affirmative action, that is a very, very, very long discussion, if I could say that. I think that is not something that we can exhaust it. But what I will say without fear is that whether there are challenges with affirmative action, it still means something very big. We may not recognize it, probably, or a certain generation may not recognize it, but those women then recognize that numerous benefits that have come out of affirmative action. So what we should struggle with is to make it better, but not to fight it. And it reminds me of a proverb where something about if you don't have a child, then you pray for a child, you get the child, but the child doesn't have, you don't have the, what's that cloth in English that you use the child to carry the child on the back? Yeah? So do not, once you have that child, do not complain about that cloth. You can carry the child in any form. So let's work at improving the affirmative action, but it is still necessary. Even today, I will tell you that. You're skeptical. Okay, then there's a question about advice for upcoming writers. I think what I would tell you is what you're already doing. To be in spaces where there are other writers, to be in spaces where there are other aspiring writers, so that you're not isolated, so that you're not on your own, so that you have someone to bounce off ideas, so that you have someone to ask when you need help. I think that is, for me, would be the major starting point for an aspiring writer. What is it that I would want to write? To encourage others? Many things that I would like to write, but I don't think I would limit myself, because writing is about everything. So every story would still be meaningful and important to learn from.
Thanks. More questions?
Hi, my name is Hilda Twongyeirwe. So you said, talking, I looked you up on Twitter, and you said you're a feminist. So I'm curious about how feminism has evolved in the Uganda Women Writers community. I know that maybe feminists, maybe 10 years ago, would not let maybe LGBT women into their spaces, but now they do. So I'm curious about that kind of journey, right, over the years, because I know you've been doing this important work for a while, and how that is different from these women empowerment. I guess the ways that feminism has grown in the writers industry, since you said that writing is activism. And then I'm also curious about how you've included younger women and maybe women who are not very respectable, like sex workers, LGBT women in writing spaces, and if there is any work to be done around that.
Okay, I think that's a major question, that's an important question. And my last statement on this presentation, I'm not sure whether I reached there, but I mentioned that writing should enable everybody get reflected into the writings of every time or any time. Because if I am part of this time, if I am part of this space today, I am part of it. And so I should find my voice in what is happening in the contemporary literature. And so, yes, today you cannot say you're this and that, and so you cannot come into this space, because then that's against, not just against human rights, but also against the human conscience, because we are different. but we all merit to be here. And so, being part of the feminist movement, I understand many people fear to say that they are feminists, but I do not, because for me, really, I think feminism is about rights. Simple. It's about you and I occupying a space together peacefully. And so I don't see any challenge with that. So yes, with that, then there shouldn't be any problem. You are there on your own terms. I am there on my own terms. Yeah. And in terms of empowerment, if you're talking about women empowerment, but then you're deciding who to empower. So where are you going to put the other person that you don't want to empower? It's the same world, yeah? And so if they are not part of the empowering movement that you're dealing with, then there will be a problem. It's the same as when we talk about having such a certain category of children educated, and then they don't care about who is not educated. They will climb your fence in the night. And so, yeah, it is a shared world.
Thanks. Personal questions?
Question here. Thank you, Hilda, for the keynote. I was busy moving around, so I missed parts of it. So in case you already talked about this, then we can move on swiftly. But in case you haven't, in some conversations I've been part of, the statistics that have been quoted seem to suggest that more women tend to be writing than men. And the reasons given may not be very important to what I'm trying to get to. I'll just give an example of the past Writivism prizes. If you look at the winners, majority are women. And if you look at the shortlisted writers, like from the shortlist to the winners, we have more women who are winning the award. So I'm curious what you think about that, if writing seems to be a more viable career for women, and if you agree with that, then how can more women take advantage of this space that they seem to thrive in for whatever reasons?
I think let the women just take advantage of that and enjoy it. I will not say why it lasts, but I will also point out, for example, that when VN started for the 5 years, it was a women's poetry initiative. And since she changed to the continent and to men and women, there has not, I think I'm right, that there has not been a woman winning. I'm right, you see? So it's, there are no rules to it. There are no rules to it. But, yeah, honestly, I will just say there are no rules to it. Because tonight, it might be a man. But maybe the women are giving it more attention because we had our residency in March. Okay, we had a residency early this year, and Glida Namukasa, who was one of the judges about who comes into the residency, she was looking at the packaging of the stories, how people package their stories, how they package their applications. And so you might find that the women are giving it more care, are being more particular about what they are submitting than probably the men. Or it could be their luck for these last few years when they won. Yeah. I wouldn't say, I wouldn't have a formula for that.
Thanks, Hilda. More questions or comments, thoughts? What would you 50 years from now, what would you want the legacy of Writivism, of FEMRITE to be?
This year, FEMRITE celebrated 20 years of publishing. The press has been misrepresenting that. It's not 20 years of existence, but 20 years of publishing. And we have just about 40 titles. But I say just about, but I would like to say that I think that's the highest literary output in the country by a single publishing house. I think there's no publishing house that has done as much for now. I'm very excited about Writivism because we've gone in sorrow, kind of, but now, you know, if so-and-so is not published at FEMRITE, they get published at Writivism. And so for me, I'm looking at us really taking advantage of this and flooding the country with literary outputs, so that when you come into the country, you're not looking around for where the writers, but the writers are really there. So I'm looking at major literary output. I'm looking at us growing the industry, not just in terms of writers, because you're growing the writers, but you need editors, you need critics, you need good printers. Yeah? Why should we continue going to India and Malaysia? So I am hoping that when the printers see that there's a new big wave of literary outputs from the country, I'm hoping they're going to also up their game in terms of printing. Yeah. So I'm looking at the whole, at us making contribution to growing the industry. And of course with the support of the region, because Writivism wouldn't be this if we didn't have the Kenyan writers I'm seeing, the Swana writers I'm seeing. It wouldn't. So thanks to the region, thanks to the cooperation that we have today.
Thanks. Any more questions?
Thank you very much. My question is about affirmative action, because we realize that FEMRITE is more like inclined to having more ladies publish their work, right? Okay, they're already writing. Honestly, most of the writers I know contemporarily are female. But there was this kind of like perception when I was growing up in the mixed school, ladies being given privilege. To me, I can say, I could be honest about it. We thought ladies needed more aid. It was sort of like a disability to be a lady because they were being given more aid to say, no, these are girls, let them go first. You know, if you have washrooms, perhaps at home, they'll be like, no, the ladies will first shower, you know. Could we take it to say that affirmative action towards ladies should tend to sort of like discriminate them as the weaker people, as the more disabled people, could say? And it's what you're tending to. What are you doing to show that being female is as same as being male, but I mean with a different natural description? That's what I'm trying to find, to distinguish between, to say we're reaching out to women to empower them, but not to sort of like give them a category of the weaker sex or the weaker people, I could say. Thank you.
I think I will address it. Yes. I think somewhere in my presentation, I pointed out the fact that having a cluster of women's literature kind of becomes a disadvantage, because then it makes women's literature vulnerable. I think I mentioned that. And so yes, that is why we are saying that we would like the women's literature to be recognized among the other literature, so that it's not othered, so that it is not put in a position of vulnerability, the way you're looking at it. I think I addressed that.
Thanks. Maybe one last question, Professor.
Sorry, I didn't come earlier, but it doesn't matter. In the 1960s, when we were all enthusiastic about writing, every secondary school had writers' club. And we used to be invited to go to the schools and have things to do with the student writers. And the cultural center used to be a big place for the meeting and participation and so on and so forth. Now, I see we have many books published, but I'm not sure whether we have readers reading clubs, so that the writers can read their works among themselves and critique the work by themselves, ask the writers in their areas about why did you write this and why did you write it this way or that way or that other way. Because we need to hear their voices and what they emphasize and so on and so forth. So it's indeed fair for us to say, in this third or fourth generation of writing, we now need to have readers class, and then that would mean that the publishers will have to produce books and present them to the readers class. And on a Saturday or a Sunday, you can go to the African school and read there. Go next time to King's College Studio, read there. Go to Central Elementary School, read there. Go to Bigezi High School and read there, and so on and so forth. So that by reading, you can find out which, as readers, you find out that some topics and some ideas, some ways of writing are not very, very interesting, and you self-critique yourself. So I'm arguing for the existence of readers' clubs in the schools, in the colleges, even if you have something like Writivism, there should also be a read activism or something of that nature, because we need people to read and compare this book and that book and so on and so forth. And then agreements and disagreements among the writers, so that it is not the book, but it is also saying, why is this very, very important to you? And then you argue out why you wrote something and why you think it is important enough to be mentioned. So I wish only you could comment on that, the need for readers' class.
Thank you very much, Professor. We are honored by your presence. In 2015, I think, FEMRITE set off on a journey to start clubs in schools, and I think we had something similar, something like that in mind. How do we grow the culture? We are getting old. How do we get more people into our footsteps? And so we started 20 clubs. I hope they are still going. In northern Uganda and western Uganda. And actually, these people need facilitation. When you give them facilitation, they write. They begin to write. They begin to critique each other, and some of them have even contributed to our anthology. We had out a poetry anthology last year, and we have about 5 students in that anthology who came from the clubs. So I think, yes, you're right, Professor. And probably that is where, okay, Dr. Bengi has left, but that is where collaboration between universities and institutions like FEMRITE and Writivism would be key. If Writivism probably does not have a budget to do that, would a department, for example, step in? Would a university then host the writers? So I think there's so much need for collaboration, and that way these initiatives will work. Thank you.
I think we'll wrap up now and we'll close the session, but I really want to thank you, Hilda, for this amazing session. And I want to thank you all for being here. So a round of applause for Hilda, please.